We're in the middle of this series on the Big Ten, right? The Ten Commandments. We're just going one after another. And like I said, it's Father's Day we're doing today, so we're doing Honor Your Father and Mother. But let's just try and remember the first four. How many? Raise your hand if you feel like you're getting a little more solid on what the Ten Commandments are than you were at the beginning of this series. I'm just not a very good teacher, obviously. So what's the first one? What's the first one? No other gods. Okay, 2 or 3 of you have it. What's the second one? Idols. No idols. What's the third one? Yes, don't take Yahweh's name in vain. What's the fourth one? We did it last week. Keep the Sabbath, right? So just to put it up for those of you who are visual, no other gods before God, no idols, don't take Yahweh's name in vain, keep the Sabbath, or in actuality, we don't really keep the Sabbath, but go and listen to last week if you haven't. And today, we're hitting honor, the fifth commandment, honor your father and your mother. Now, at first, for many of us, when we think of this command, it feels a little bit trite, if we're honest. Fact of the matter is, for many of us as evangelicals, when we think of honor your father and your mother, this commandment is for who? Children, like young children. Like this is the one we do in Sunday school. We don't do it in big church because it's little children who need to learn to honor your father and your mother. And of course, obviously, this does include little children. But it just feels a bit trite. It also seems weirdly specific. I mean, you got the Big Ten, all right? So God gives Moses the Big Ten on tablets of stone. You have all kinds of things you could put in the Big Ten. This just seems oddly specific. Like honor your father and mother, absolutely, it must be important. It's also important, even if it was just for little kids, it would still be important. But shouldn't we honor everybody? Like in the ancient world, wouldn't it have been important to honor the king? Right? In our modern world, wouldn't it be important to honor, the different levels of government or police officers, or for kids, teachers? There's lots of important, judges and all kinds of things. There's lots of important authority figures in our world today, and in the ancient world, thousands of years ago. There's lots of important authority figures to honor and to obey and to respect, and yet in the Ten Commandments, we get this super specific. Honor your father and your mother. Why so specific? And then the other thing that's very interesting about this command is it is the only one of the 10 that comes with a promise, which is, again, seems odd. So that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. Now, again, awesome. So we just take this commandment. Yes, honor your parents, little kids, honor, your mom and dad, and you're going to live a long life, which, okay, awesome. There's this promise, but shouldn't God be blessing us for obeying all the commandments? Why is there a specific blessing only tied to this one? And why is it so specific just to parents, not to everyone? In fact, really, we could turn this around, and as parents, shouldn't we also honor and respect our children, particularly as they themselves become adults? So in order to explain both of those things, why is this commandment so specific? Why is it directly aimed at father and mother? And second of all, why does it have this specific promise attached to it when none of the other commandments do? In order to answer both of those questions, you have to bear with me. We're going to take about 10 minutes here, and I got to take you back into the ancient world. I'm going to show you some pictures of what an ancient household looked like. I'm going to show you a whole bunch of things, but I need to take you back into the ancient world because we have no concept. The way we live today is nothing like ancient people in Iron Age Israel lived 3,000 years ago. And when you understand how they lived, this commandment is really going to start to pop, and then we can do some work of how do we now bring it into our world today. But if we go back 3,000 years, okay, the first thing you have to understand, before I show you any pictures, is there's something you have to understand about daily life, is that 99% of ancient Israelites, I'm going to teach some of you a new word, if you didn't know this already before. But 99%, the vast majority of ancient Israelites and other nations in the area too, lived what's called a subsistence existence. Okay? None of us here lives a subsistence existence. You say, what is a subsistence existence? It means that every day they had to work to get what they needed to survive. And we here in Canada and the modern world, now there are places in the world today where people still live a subsistence existence, but we here in Canada, we have no understanding of what a subsistence existence is like. You and I do not have to work every day to survive. If we get sick, we just take a day off, or 2, or a week. And some of you take off even longer. But we just take a day off, and we're not worried we're going to starve. We lie on the couch and we moan and groan. We want our spouse and our kids to take care of us. And when we get hungry, we just pop something out of the fridge or the freezer, and we warm it up, and we eat. And we didn't have to work for it that day. And we all have, and fridges and freezers. That's a whole other thing. And electricity. All of us in our homes today have multiple days worth of food stored in our house for a few days in advance. And when we run out of that food, it's not like we're going to run out of food. We have massive, unimaginable to an ancient person, warehouses, multiple ones of them in every town and city, called grocery stores, with absolutely humongous piles of food. And we don't even need to work every day to be able to get that. In fact, we can be off work for some amount of time because we can just buy stuff off of credit cards or out of our savings accounts. We have so much margin. We have water piped into multiple rooms in our homes. We just flick a tap, and we have life-giving water. We can clean, we can cook, we can drink. Subsistence existence, we don't understand. But an ancient Israelite living 3,000 years ago, their life is, again, it is unimaginable. The way they operate and think is totally different. Even if you're sick, if you don't get out of bed in the morning, you're not eating. If you didn't get out of bed the day before and grind some of the grain that you had harvested a year before into flour, you have nothing with which to bake bread today. And if you don't bake bread today, you've got nothing to eat today. And if you don't, throughout the entire agriculture season, if you're not out there, planting a big enough field and tilling it and tending it and then harvesting it, you're not going to have enough food to get you through the next winter. And preserving it, and on and on and on and on. If you're not getting up, you're not drinking water if someone doesn't go to wherever the nearest water source is, or if you haven't dug a well, if you're not going to the well and coming back with water. Subsistence existence means every day what you have to survive, you are working for that day. It's what you have around you. You don't have a savings account for a rainy day. You don't have a credit card or a line of credit. You don't have grocery stores. Everything you need is going to be at your house, and you're going to have to labor for it day after day after day without margin. Now, what does this have to do with the commandment to honor your father and your mother? Well, you're not going to be in this survival game by yourself. You're going to be in this survival game with a team. You have a built-in team, and you're closely related to them all because they're your family. And so your whole existence is going to revolve around your family, your parents, your siblings, and actually it's going to be a multi-generational family. Your parents, your siblings, your kids, your siblings' kids, as everybody grows up, you're all going to be together, and everybody's going to work. Everybody's going to have a role. There's going to be farming and herding and making clothes and all that sort of stuff. Just to help you kind of get your mind around this, I want to show you a picture of a typical ancient Iron Age Israelite home, all right? So here's what an ancient Iron Age Israelite home looks like, roughly like this. There's no roof over the courtyard, all right? And by the way, this is so typical. This is over the course of about 600 years. Basically, all the homes in Israel are like this. Even wealthy people, they just build, and there aren't many of them, but even wealthy people build this same sort of home, they just build it bigger. So what you have is, you notice it's all walled in, so you got to have it walled in for protection, wild animals, sometimes bandits, people, whatever. In the front of the house you have, and by the way, it's very small. All right, if you would see these things in real life, they're quite small. But you have an open courtyard, usually divided into 3 sections in the front. That part usually doesn't have a roof. You're keeping some of your animals in there. So you're sleeping. Your house is also a barn. You have food preparation happening in there. But you also have food preserving and processing. You don't have a Walmart to go and buy clothes. So you have to have the sheep that are going to give you the wool so that you can turn wool into cloth, and then you can turn cloth into clothes. Anything leather you have to make. The family is a self-contained survival economic unit. No grocery stores, no hospitals, no clothing stores, no Canadian Tire with tools. Everything you need has to be made in the home together. The family functions together. Here, I'll just give you another angle just to kind of look at this just with a cutaway. If you cut away the wall, you can again kind of see what an Israelite home. This is literally this is about 600 years. Almost all of their homes are based on this kind of concept. All right? And so your family is a self-contained economic and survival unit. Your home is not just a place you go to relax when you're done work. Your home is a factory, a barn, a shed, a workshop. It's a grocery store. It's everything you need at the home, and the family is working together. All right? So, now, the question is, who's in charge of all of this? Because you don't have various levels of government then for this. You don't have a school system, you don't have a healthcare system, you don't have hydro infrastructure. Road infrastructure is you have some paths, you have a couple of roads. There is a king in much of this time period. You have a king in Israel, but he's some guy far away, and the only time you hear from him is when he wants to take some of your kids for his army or for servants or something. So you are on your own. So who's in charge? It's not a democracy. You're not voting in a city council or a provincial government. Who's in charge? Well, on Father's Day here, Dad is in charge. And actually, more specifically, Dad also has a dad. So actually, the main guy is Grandpa. Yeah. Some of you want to go back to subsistence living in ancient Israel. Trust me, you do not. But yes, if you're a grandpa, you're the guy. All right? So Grandpa, so what happens is you have a multi-generational household. So you have kids, your siblings are having kids, Dad's still alive, he's in charge of the whole thing. As people run out of space, I'll just go back here to this picture for just a moment. As people run out of space, they just build next door. Okay, so son, if you're a son, as you get older, now you get married, you start having kids, there's no space in here, you just go next door, you build right next door, and everybody works together. You're still working the same fields, you're still working as a team. And everybody is needed. By the way, just quick rabbit trail, I'm pretty sure I have time. There's an interesting custom, because some of you are going right away, because your villages, now what you have, all of your villages are essentially extended families. So, and Grandpa, the patriarch, as long as he's alive, he's like the mayor, all right? He's the boss. And so, now, the thing is, now right away, some of you are going, well, how do you have people getting married every year? And it's just cousin with cousin, generation after generation. That's not going to be good. And so, actually, what they did is, this is why some of the kids have to leave to get married. Now, it's not going to be the sons, because they are going to be the next patriarchs, and they're the ones who are going to inherit Dad's land and Dad's authority. So the daughters are going to have to leave. They're going to have to go elsewhere, and and they're not going to be able to meet these people at the bowling alley or at church or young adults or whatever. So dad's going to have to find them. He's going to have to connect with some other family in another village, and he's going to have to marry off his daughter. Now, one of the things you'll notice in the Old Testament is there's this strange custom of a bride price. Always they got to pay, and it's in all the stories in the Old Testament where there's marriage. Like when Abraham goes to get a wife for Isaac, and they bring Rebekah all kinds of gifts. When Jacob goes to Laban and he wants a wife, what does he first have to do before he can get a wife, get her to be married? He has to work for 7 years. And then his father-in-law tricks him, so he marries the wrong sister, which that is very confusing, and we won't get too much into the details there, but then he still wants the other sister. He wants the prettier one to him. I'm sure they were both pretty. But anyway, so then he has to do, what does he have to do for the second sister? He has to work 7 years again. And you'll see this throughout the Old Testament. They always got to pay. No pay, either labor or land or animals, some kind of wealth. You pay the woman's family if you want to marry a woman. And you might wonder, okay, that's kind of odd. There's cultures today where they do it the other way. That's called a dowry. A dowry is when the bride's family pays the groom's family. But in ancient Israel, it was the opposite. The groom's family pays the bride family. Why would they have to pay for a bride? It all makes a ton of sense when you realize they are subsistence living families, barely making it by. When you send a woman off to another village, you are losing a valuable, skilled laborer, and the groom's family is gaining a valuable, skilled laborer. You just can't afford to feed a young girl until she's 13 or 14, whenever they got married, somewhere in there. You can't afford to just feed and raise these girls and then send them off. And so the groom's family has to mitigate some of that economic impact so that the bride's family actually isn't put into some kind of a crisis. So you have a bride price. So that's all going on. And Papa's in charge. Grandpa's in charge. Dad's in charge. Now, it's not that women didn't have any authority in this world, however, but they had authority within their sphere. So in this world where everybody's labor is needed, and remember, like you have to think of all the different things. It's not just finding food and water every day. You have to have not just clothing, but all like leather stuff for tools, a plow, like wooden stuff, but baskets, pottery, soap. They had to make all of this. You need highly skilled managers, people who are efficient, and they know all the tricks, and they know the ingredients, and they know how to do these things. And that was the matriarch. That was the moms, and then ultimately, grandma. And these women were highly, and this is why, by the way, in Proverbs 31, there's like this perfect woman is this woman who can do all this stuff. A mom who was highly efficient and could plan. This woman was vital to the survival of the family because she has to know, okay, how many mouths are we going to be feeding this winter? We need to be storing up X amount of this, and here's how we're going to efficiently divide up the labor, and here's how you make cloth, and here's how you do this, and every day is maximized, right? So you have the matriarch is in charge of all the household stuff that's going on, and there's lots of stuff there, efficiency necessary, and then the men and the boys are taking care of the outside work. So the patriarch is over the whole thing, and the matriarch is over this like inside work, all right? And their authority is like absolute. Because all of society functions off these units. There's not other levels of government. You got to listen to the king when he wants to raise an army or when he wants to tax you. But other than that, he does nothing for you other than kind of protect the country. Everything else is being done within the family. So now when we go back to the 10 Commandments, and commandment number 5, honor your father and mother, takes on a whole new level of meaning. First of all, it's directed it includes children, but this is about adult kids. Honor your father and mother is in some ways equivalent for us today of all the various authority and levels of different things, people who are in charge of stuff that keep our society going today. Honor your father and mother is literally talking about, like, you got to listen. Like, grandpa's in charge, and if the village has grown and there's multiple families or multiple now grandpas in the family, they literally form the elders. When you read about the elders at the city gate in the Old Testament, literally that's like at the coffee shop at Timmy's, you got a group of grandpas. But they're not just spitzeering about nothing, they're in charge. And these guys, so your patriarch in ancient Israel and the ancient Near East all around Israel was in charge of, any kind of property disputes. There's no court to go to. Whose property is what? They had life and death power in cases of like crime, assault, stealing. It all had to be dealt with in the family. They had all of that power is there. They judged. They made decisions. They are the ones who said, we're going to farm in this way, and we're going to farm this, and we're going to do it here. They made all the big decisions that guided how everybody lived in the village and in the home. So honor your father and your mother is literally, it's directed at all the adult kids. You will listen to the boss, and the bosses are mom and dad. All right? Now, what does that have to do, though, with so that you may live long? So that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. Okay, so you need to obey your aging parents. Even as an adult in ancient Israel, your parents were in charge. They were your dad was the mayor and the prime minister all rolled into one, and the police and the judge. But what does that have to do with so you may live long? I mean, it feels kind of random. Like, God, if we keep the Sabbath, shouldn't I have a promise of long life there? Like, if I don't covet, shouldn't I have long life there? Like, it just feels a bit odd that God would only promise a blessing for this one thing. But we're actually thinking about it wrong. Instead of thinking of this as a blessing that God just kind of randomly bestows from heaven because he's so happy with you obeying this one command, but he obviously doesn't care about the other commands, it has nothing to do with that. The point is, this is actually the result. It's not that this is some kind of random blessing, and God says, if you obey your aging parents, speaking of in ancient Israel, I'm going to bless you because I'm so happy with you. No. In that society, in that context, listening to your grandparents was actually the way you were going to live better and live longer. Why? Because they actually know everything. Okay, you have to think, this is very different than in a modern technological society like we live in today. In our society today, and I'll come back to this in a few minutes, technology is constantly changing, the economy. I mean, I just look at my life. I'm not even that old. I'm 48, halfway to 96, which I'm not even sure I really want to get that far, so I'm probably over halfway. Right? But, my parents, we only got the internet, and it was dial-up. It wasn't good. There was no such thing as Wi-Fi. But we only got the internet when I was in high school. I got my first cell phone less than 10 years ago. All right? Like, the rate at which things are changing is immense. In the ancient world, things don't change for centuries. The Iron Age lasted like almost 1,000 years. Then, and before that, you have the Bronze Age. You have different, and each age lives for centuries and centuries. Then you have a technical breakthrough, and, different things change, and then it stays the same for like 1,000 years. In a world like that, where you don't have the internet, you can't Google it. So in an ancient world like this, if you go out into the fields and you notice some kind of a blight, or there's something wrong with the grain, there's something wrong with the wheat. You can't Google, what is it, and how do I fix it? And where do I go to buy the spray? Or whatever farmers do. I guess they don't spray it with hand. For sure they don't do that. But anyway, whatever. You can't go to a library and get an encyclopedia and look up what are the different kinds of things that could be affecting my crops. You can't look anything up There's no books. There's no internet. Nobody could read even if there was. So where is your information in an ancient world like that? It's in the brains of your old people. They're the ones. Whoever's seen the most harvests is going to have the best idea of what this blight is. So Grandpa's going to go out there and he's going to go, oh yeah, 30 summers ago we had this and I know what it is. And everybody's going to listen. They're not going to roll their eyes like nowadays. Like, oh, brother, another story. As you try to teach your grandparent how to use a cell phone. Back then, the only information you had available to you was whatever information is in the brains of the people in your household, and the one with the most information is the one with the most experience. When a pregnancy is going wrong, or a birth is going sideways, who's the most important person? Grandma. Because she's seen dozens of pregnancies. She's seen the good, she's seen the bad, she's seen the in-between. She has a wealth of experience, and you got to listen to her. You better honor these people because they actually know what you need. So honor your father and mother so that you may live long is not God just randomly going, I'm not going to bless people for obeying all 10. I can't give out that many blessings. I'll just do it on number 5. It's not that. It's connected to what you're doing is actually the key to success. All right? So honor your father and your mother because they actually know what they're doing. So in the ancient context, oh yeah, see, grandpa and grandma actually knew best. Now notice I had to put that word actually in there. A bit insulting maybe for some of the grandparents here today. But grandma and grandpa actually knew best in the ancient world. Okay? Huge. So honor your father and mother. In the ancient context, commandment number 5 in the 10 Commandments breaks into 3 things. And the first 2 is what we've looked at so far. It literally means obey. They were the authorities in day-to-day life. You actually have to obey them. Even if you're 45, if your dad's still alive and you're a 45-year-old man, you are obeying your dad in the Old Testament. And you said, well, why haven't you moved out yet? Exactly. You're still living with them too. So there's that. I mean, everybody's complaining now that kids are moving out later and later. Back then, they never moved out really. Totally different thing though. And respect. Now, respect here, I'm not just talking about being nice. Obviously, we still need to respect our parents and grandparents today, for sure. But respect in the 5th commandment, out of that honor, obey and respect, is actually a respect of not just being nice, like, letting them have the seat when they come into the house or whatever. It literally means having humility. They actually know more than me. Like, grandma actually knows more than me about this pregnancy. And grandpa actually knows more than me what we should be doing to farm. So I'm going to honor him. I'm going to obey him. I'm going to just respect. I'm just going to listen and all that, okay? Now, there's a third thing. There's one last thing that comes under this honor your father and mother. And so as your parents, so obviously as grandma and grandpa get older and older in this ancient world, they're becoming more and more frail. So they can do less and less physical work, but in a economy like that, they're becoming more and more valuable because of what they know. But they're still more and more frail. And so it was very important, and you'll see this, I'll show you 2 quick verses, but it was very, very important in the Bible, in the Old Testament, and in all kinds of ancient writings from around the ancient Near East in that time period, that caring physically, these are really valuable members of the community. You need them. So you need to care for them. Because you need what they know. And of course you love them and you respect them too, but you need what they know. So caring for your elders, your parents, is a huge deal. Now, this is where there's a whole bunch of verses. I could show you a bunch like this, but this is from the next chapter. I'll just take you to Exodus 21, which is the next chapter after the 10 Commandments. I could show you a bunch more. There's lots of laws in the Old Testament about, not hitting your father and mother, or attacking or whatever your father and mother. Now, we tend to think of that as, the only people we can think of in our culture who would be hitting anyone would be some rebellious teenager or some rebellious young adult who just needs to be, slapped around a little bit, like, get it together, right? So, but verse 15, and I just meant that as a joke. By the way, that could go all kinds of places. But anyone who attacks their father or mother is to be put to death. Now, getting past the death penalty thing, which is quite severe, when you read these verses, you need to not think of a young adult or a teenager attacking their parents. You need to think of elder abuse. That's what's in mind in these verses. This is elder abuse. You have an aging parent or grandparent who's a vital source of leadership and authority in a community. And if someone attacks these people, that is a serious offense. 2 verses later, it says this: anyone who curses their father or mother. Again, we think of teenagers. And of course, it would cover that too. But the point here is, you don't disrespect the people who are in charge, who actually know what they're doing. Huge. Right? So these verses that talk about this, put the words elder abuse. When you read laws like this in the Old Testament, put elder abuse there. That's what the verses are mostly aimed at. Now, so caring for your aging parents is the third piece of honor your father and mother. This is about so much more than just being nice. Now, as we look at these 3 things today, we realize our context has changed a lot. Okay, our aging parents and grandparents are no longer the ones with the knowledge we need for survival and success. And I know that sounds terrible. Even as I say that, people are going, oh, no, don't go there. Let me just ask you this. Do you go to your aging grandparents for financial or career advice today? And the answer is no. Most of us spend our time trying to keep our aging parents or grandparents, depending on how aged they are, from falling into scams or being taken advantage of. Isn't that true? Right? This is how our modern world and our ancient world are like flipped. In the ancient world, your elders were your authorities. In our world, our elders are often the vulnerable people. We need to protect them. And there's multiple reasons for that. Part of it is this fast, technologically changing world where things are just different, generation to generation, how people live. We don't, if we're going to be honest today as parents, those of you who have kids or adult kids, let's just be honest right now. Some of the technological revolutions that are happening right now, we have no idea what the job market's going to be 10 years from now. 0. 3,000 years ago, Grandpa could tell you, this is how you do things. Do you think we can tell our kids now, do this, and this, and you're going to be successful in 10 years? We can help them with character stuff, persevere, have a hard work ethic, all that sort of stuff. But in terms of the specific advice they need throughout their lives to have a successful career, we no longer have that like they did 3,000 years ago. Plus, we live so long now that we live into years of cognitive decline and even dementia. These are some of the scourges of our modern world, is that we live with some of these things. And so, as we all know, in the modern world, we take it for granted. Most of us will end up caring for our parents as vulnerable people for a number of years towards the end of their life. So that changes obey and respect when it comes to assuming they know better, doesn't it? We actually have to adapt this. In fact, we as parents, this is where, when we think of honoring your father and mother, this is where we parents, as we have adult children, we actually need to humble ourselves, and we actually need to let go of the reins a bit. See, for thousands of years, parents never had to let go of the reins. As they got older and more knowledgeable and got more authority in the ancient community, the more in charge they were. Jacob was in charge of his 12 sons till the day he died. And that's how that ancient society worked. Us parents now with our adult kids, we are not in charge of their lives. We actually have to adapt. We actually have to let them go. Our role in modern society, because of the way it functions, is we actually have to move from a directive role to a supportive role. It doesn't mean there's no wisdom. I'm not saying that we as parents have no wisdom to give our kids. Like I said, there's the generalized wisdom and character and, perseverance and hard work and teaching our kids about some of those basics. But in terms of as we age and as we get older and older and as our adult kids get older and older, actually our role is not this. And we have to humble ourselves and realize in our modern world, we actually often don't know best. And when we do, we can actually just keep it to ourselves and be there for our kids. Unless they're asking us, then we can tell them. And when they're little, we can tell them whenever we want. But anyway, so parents, we need to adapt in this honor your father and your mother because the world has changed. And what's needed of us is different, all right? But then there's a second thing. So that part we adapt. Here's what, in terms of what we take from the ancient world now to the modern world, here's what honor your father and mother means. This is the piece that stands still today as strong as ever before, is the caring for and loving our aging parents and grandparents. We need to take honor your father and mother from being this trite little thing we only teach kids in Sunday school and rethink maybe even the wording of how we remember these things. Honor your father and mother is not just about being nice to them. It's about caring for and loving our aging parents and grandparents as they get older. And we live longer now than ever before. So let me finish this message now with two practical things. How do we apply honor your father and mother today? How do we apply this caring for and loving our aging parents today? Because things have also in some ways gotten harder than they were in the ancient world. The piece that's gotten harder is because we live so much longer. In the ancient world, you lived and then you died, but you weren't kept alive for years and years and years of all kinds of extra decline. By the way, it's a wonderful thing that we live longer. I'm not complaining about that. But it means there's a lengthier period where we're caring for our elderly. And a lot of that caring can't be just done. Like in the ancient days, we could just get mad at modern people. Oh, modern people don't care for their parents the way they used to. Anybody here who's had an aging parent with dementia or some serious physical disability and the way we work. In the old days, like in ancient Israel, they all lived in a household and grandma and grandpa still live there and everybody's around to care for them. Now we each have jobs. We've got to drive away from home every day and make money and come back. Who's taking care of grandma and grandpa during the day? And there's lots of high needs things that are too expensive. We can't just tell people flippantly, just care for them like they did in ancient times. It's actually not that easy. And yet, the command is clear. This is what we need to do. So I'll finish, and we could spend hours and hours going in depth here. I just want to give you kind of two general principles for us to practice and put this into practical for our lives. So the first one is we need to think on a whole bigger scale. And here's something I'm very passionate about, and I think as Christians we need to get more passionate about in our modern world. Because when it comes to our politics and the way we think about this as a society, we have to think about aging in terms of society. Many of us will not be able to, on our own, just care for our parents and provide everything they need. It'll be too expensive and too labor-intensive. So I think as Christians, I really hope we can redefine what it means to be pro-life as Christians in the modern world. Because for lots of Christians today, being pro-life literally just means being against abortion. Which is great, because unborn babies are people. But guess what? Unborn babies represent only one small piece of the pie, which is humanity. Being pro-life means being pro-all life. We cannot be single-issue voters, where it's like, well, what is a candidate stance on abortion? But can't vote for him or vote for him. A candidate can have a good stance on abortion and have absolutely no stance on how are we handling the problem of not enough beds, super long wait times for personal care homes. Pro-life means pro-life. And we actually need, as a society, being pro-life means thinking about this. Our political parties and our politicians, we need to actually think about how do we spend our money in the best ways so that we can actually care for the elders in our midst? This is literally what honor your father and mother means. It's not just being nice to your mom and dad while thousands of elderly people don't have the care they need and are by themselves and alone and depressed. We need as a society, and yet at the same time, we can't just feel guilty, well, because we can't do it all on our own. So we need to attack this as a society, and as Christians, we need to think about this intelligently. I'm almost scared to say amen, because I don't know what people will say, so we'll just keep going, okay? I'll say amen to myself. Amen. Good job. The second thing is the golden rule. This is actually our Christian 10 Commandments, is actually the golden rule. So if you want to know how to treat your parents, it comes down to, at some point, most of us are going to make it to old age. And even if you don't have kids, we have to think to ourselves, the golden rule. How, when we're in our 80s or 70s or whatever it is, how do we want to be treated? What do we want life to look like for the last 15, 20 years of our lives? And we need to have a clear picture of how we would like that to look for us. And we need to build a society that does that. And we need to do that for our parents and family members now. And of course, I understand one big caveat in all of this is some of you have very abusive or toxic parents. I'm not putting a guilt trip on you that you need, if you're like, there's just people where actually being around your parents is the wrong thing because they're so toxic or abusive or whatever it is. I get that. That's a big caveat. Just, you don't have to feel guilty about that. But the golden rule and being pro-life, I think, need to guide us as churches and Christians in the modern age. So, would you bow your heads with me and close your eyes? And let's give the Lord a moment to stir up in us whatever it is he might want to be saying. There's this whole growing demographic of people who are really struggling in our modern world. With long wait lists and not enough care and a lot of loneliness. And some of this stuff is just epidemic among our elderly people. Honor your father and mother is exactly about that. Are we going to be the generation that actually pays attention to honor your father and mother? Or will we leave this as a Sunday school lesson for little children to be good at home? Father in heaven, give us ideas as Christians. It's been some of our spiritual forefathers, Christians, who started the first hospitals and some of the first schools. Will we be at the forefront too in figuring out new ways and better ways of navigating this modern world so that our fathers and mothers and grandmas and grandpas are truly taken care of and loved with dignity in our modern world? And Lord, for our personal, the specific fathers and mothers and grandparents in our personal lives as they age, Father, help us always to remember the golden rule, to put ourselves there where we will one day be, and to honor our parents. In Jesus' name we pray. And all God's people said,